Ever pondered what makes your Spring Boot REST API reliable and user-friendly? The secret lies in effective exception handling. Exception handling is a critical aspect of developing any robust REST API. It ensures that the API can handle unexpected situations gracefully without crashing or giving vague responses. This video will be all about how to implement exception handling in your Spring Boot REST API. Dive straight into the world of exceptions. An exception is an event that disrupts the normal flow of the program. In a Spring Boot REST API, exceptions could arise from various scenarios like invalid data inputs, database connectivity issues, or server downtime. To handle these exceptions, Spring provides a mechanism known as exception handling. The first step to implement exception handling is to create a global exception handler class. This class should be annotated with the @controller_advice annotation. The @controller_advice annotation allows the class to handle all exceptions across the various controllers in the application. Next, define methods inside this class to handle specific exceptions. Each method should be annotated with the @exceptionhandler annotation, followed by the type of exception it handles. For instance, one could declare a method handle null pointer exception to handle all null pointer exceptions occurring in the app. Inside these methods, craft a meaningful response to be returned whenever the exception occurs. A typical response could include details about the exception, a helpful message, and the HTTP status code. Remember, the goal is to provide a response that helps the client understand what went wrong and how to rectify it. To handle multiple exceptions with the same method, simply pass them as parameters to the @exceptionhandler annotation. This can be particularly handy when several exceptions should result in the same response. Now, what if an exception occurs that your application hasn't specifically handled? To tackle this, define a method to handle all other exceptions. This method should be annotated with exceptionhandler exception.class. This acts as a catch-all handler that ensures your API never returns vague or unhelpful responses. Finally, don't forget to test your exception handlers. Use unit tests to simulate different scenarios and ensure your handlers are functioning as expected. Testing ensures that your API can gracefully handle all possible exceptions and significantly improves its reliability. In conclusion, implementing exception handling in a Spring Boot REST API involves creating a global exception handler class with the @controller_advice annotation, defining methods to handle specific exceptions, crafting meaningful responses, and testing these handlers. With these steps, you can enhance the robustness and user-friendliness of your Spring Boot REST API. Remember, an API that handles exceptions well is an API that users can trust. So, take this knowledge and start implementing exception handling in your Spring Boot REST APIs. Happy coding!